In the icy fjords of northern Scandinavia, 872 AD, a wedding feast turned to slaughter when Jarl Haakon's men descended on the small coastal village of Ravnfjord. By dawn, the once thriving settlement was nothing but smoldering longhouses and silent bodies scattered across the blood-soaked snow, all because a bride was deemed unworthy for bearing the mark of the gods in her silver-streaked hair. Before we continue this extraordinary tale, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. And if this story of honor, betrayal, and unexpected love touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something truly special for you. Everyone perished in what would later be known as the Ravnfjord massacre. Everyone except 19-year-old Sigrid Freyasdottir, who by some twisted stroke of fate had fled to the sacred grove just moments before the attack, when her betrothed publicly rejected her at their wedding feast, mocking the premature gray streaks that had appeared in her flaxen hair over the winter. When renowned warrior Ragnar Graybeard discovered the lone woman hiding among the ancient oaks dedicated to the gods, he faced an impossible choice: return her to her father's neighboring settlement, where her cursed appearance might invite further tragedy, or take her to his own lands, where no dishonored bride had ever been welcomed among his proud clan. This is the extraordinary saga of how two souls marked by the gods' silver touch formed an unbreakable bond that would change the fate of the northern kingdoms in the time when Christianity threatened to extinguish the old ways. Sigrid Freyasdottir never intended to bring shame upon her family that fateful evening. "Keep your head covered until the bride price is paid," her mother Helga had warned as they prepared for the wedding feast that would unite their modest fishing village with the more powerful settlement ruled by Jarl Haakon. Men can be fickle when it comes to omens they don't understand. But on that frigid midwinter night, as mead flowed freely and the great hall grew stifling with bodies and smoke, Sigrid had momentarily pushed back her embroidered head covering, desperate for a cool breath of air. The intricate bridal crown her mother had woven with such care shifted, revealing the streaks of silver that had mysteriously appeared in her hair after she'd fallen through lake ice the previous winter and been rescued by what some whispered was the intervention of the goddess Freya herself. "I'll only let it show for a moment," she promised herself, her calloused fingers clutching the delicate silver pendant shaped like Freya's falcon that her grandmother had given her before passing to Valhalla. Just until the heat subsides. That moment was enough. Her betrothed, Ivar Håkonsson, son of the powerful Jarl, spotted the silver strands gleaming in the firelight. The hall fell silent as he approached, his face twisted in disgusted recognition. "What trickery is this?" he demanded, yanking away her head covering completely. "You bring a marked woman before me, Thorvald?" He sneered at Sigrid's father. Bride already touched by age or worse? The god's curse?" Sigrid froze, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her father stepped forward, his weathered face rigid with controlled fury. "My daughter bears no curse," Thorvald replied, his voice steady despite the insult. "The silver came after her brush with death last winter. Some among our people consider it a blessing from Freya, a sign of the goddess's favor." "Favor?" Ivar spat on the rush-strewn floor. "What man wants a young bride who already appears as a crone? What omens would such a union bring? Barren fields? Stillborn sons?" Murmurs rippled through the gathered guests. Sigrid felt her mother's hand close around her arm, offering silent support, but the damage was done. What had been meant as a joyous alliance between settlements was unraveling before her eyes. Jarl Haakon rose from his high seat, his cold gaze assessing the situation with calculating precision. "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "But my son speaks truly about omens. These are difficult times, with Christian missionaries pressing from the south and resources growing scarce. We cannot risk the gods' displeasure." He gestured to Thorvald. "Take back your silver-haired daughter and the bride price. This union is dissolved before it began." The pronouncement fell like a physical blow. Sigrid stood immobile, shame burning through her veins as faces turned toward her, some sympathetic, others suspicious, a few openly hostile. From the corner of her eye, she saw Ivar already turning his attention to her younger cousin Astrid, who had accompanied them to the feast. "Go to the sacred grove," her mother whispered urgently in her ear. "Pray to Freya for guidance. I will speak with your father about what must be done." With those words, Helga pressed Sigrid's cloak into her hands and gently pushed her toward the side entrance of the great hall. Numbly, Sigrid obeyed, slipping away from the feast that had become her public humiliation. The bitter winter air struck her face as she emerged, a welcome shock after the stifling atmosphere inside. Without conscious thought, her feet carried her along the familiar path to the sacred grove that stood on a rise overlooking both the village and the dark fjord beyond. Tears froze on her cheeks as she climbed, her mind replaying every excruciating moment of her rejection. What would become of her now? At 19, she was already considered past the prime age for a first marriage. And now, marked as she was with the silver streaks that had appeared after her near drowning, what man would have her? What future remained? Her people were proud, but practical. An unmarried daughter was another mouth to feed, especially during the harsh northern winters. Without a husband's protection or children to care for her in old age, what value did she hold? The sacred grove appeared before her, ancient oak trees standing like sentinels against the star-filled sky. At the center stood a massive oak, its trunk wider than 3 men standing together, its bare winter branches reaching toward the heavens like supplicating arms. This was Freya's place, where women came to pray for fertility, safe childbirth, and love. Sigrid approached the great oak, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. She pressed her forehead against the rough bark. "Lady Freya," she whispered, "why have you marked me this way if it brings only shame? What purpose does this silver crown serve if it drives away all possibility of a future?" Only the soft sigh of wind through bare branches answered her. Sigrid sank down at the base of the tree, drawing her cloak tighter against the biting cold. She had not thought to bring furs or extra coverings when she fled the hall. If she remained too long, the bitter night would claim her as surely as shame now did. Yet she could not bear to return and face the pitying or accusing stares. Better to commune with the goddess until her father came to collect her, and they made the shameful journey home. She did not know how much time had passed. Perhaps she had dozed despite the cold, when the first distant scream reached her ears. Startled, fully awake, Sigrid rose to her feet, her senses suddenly alert. The scream came again, followed by others, then the unmistakable clash of metal against metal. From her vantage point on the rise, she had a clear view of the village below. Orange flames had begun to lick the sides of the nearest longhouses. Dark figures moved through the settlement like wolves among sheep, their weapons glinting in the firelight. "No," she breathed, her body frozen in horror. "Father. Mother." Every instinct urged her to run down the hill, to find her family, to help somehow. But her father had been a warrior in his youth before becoming the village leader. His last words to her echoed suddenly in her mind from a hunting trip the previous autumn. "If danger comes, find a secure position and remain silent until you are certain of friend versus foe. The brave fool dies, the wise survivor lives to protect another day." With trembling legs, Sigrid retreated deeper into the sacred grove, concealing herself within a hollow formed by the ancient oak's massive roots. She pulled her dark cloak around her, making herself as small as possible, and watched in helpless horror as her world burned below. The attack was swift and merciless. From fragments of shouted orders carried on the wind, she recognized the attackers as Jarl Haakon's elite guard, the same men who had been feast guests just hours before. Through tears that froze almost instantly on her lashes, Sigrid watched as villagers tried to flee, only to be cut down in the snow. The flames grew higher, consuming longhouse after longhouse. The screams gradually diminished, replaced by the crackling roar of fire and occasional triumphant shouts from the attackers. Jarl Haakon himself stood in the center of the carnage, directing his men with calculated precision. This was no random raid or misunderstanding. This was methodical extermination, and Sigrid knew, with sickening certainty, that her cursed silver hair, her public humiliation, had merely provided the convenient excuse. Jarl Haakon had likely planned this attack for seasons, waiting for the right moment to eliminate the independent coastal village that controlled the narrow fjord entrance his ships needed for spring raids. She had not caused this massacre, but her rejection had been the spark that lit the already prepared pyre. Dawn broke with agonizing slowness, pale light creeping across a scene of devastation. The attackers had departed with the last of the darkness, taking whatever valuables they could carry, and leaving behind only smoking ruins and frozen corpses half buried in bloodied snow. Sigrid remained in her hiding place, numb with cold and grief. She had watched, silent and immobile, as her entire world was systematically destroyed. Her body now moved mechanically, without conscious direction, as she finally emerged from the hollow oak roots. Her legs, stiff from cold and immobility, nearly buckled as she stumbled down the path toward what remained of her village. Hope, fragile and illogical, still flickered in her heart. Perhaps someone had survived. Perhaps her parents had hidden as she had. The hope died as she reached the outskirts of the settlement. No movement stirred among the smoldering ruins. Bodies lay where they had fallen. Some she recognized despite their terrible wounds. Others were burned beyond identification. Near what had been the Great Hall, she found her father. Thorvald had died with his old war axe in hand, surrounded by 3 of Haakon's men he had taken, with him to Valhalla. Not far away lay her mother, a kitchen knife still clutched in her frozen fingers. Sigrid sank to her knees between her parents' bodies, too empty even for tears. Everything, everyone, was gone. The life she had known, the future she had expected, even the rejection that had seemed so devastating just hours ago, all of it rendered meaningless by this greater annihilation. For hours, she sat motionless, as if keeping vigil. The winter sun climbed higher, offering light but little warmth. She should move, she knew distantly. She should seek shelter, find food, consider what to do next. But the enormity of her situation paralyzed her as surely as the cold that had settled deep in her bones. What was there to do? Where could she go? The nearest Allied settlement was 2 days' journey through snow-covered forest. In her current state, weakened by cold and shock, she would never reach it. It was the sound of approaching horses that finally broke through her stupor. Riders coming from the north, not from Jarl Haakon's direction, but strangers nonetheless. Friend or foe, it hardly mattered now. She lacked the strength to flee and had nothing left to lose. Sigrid managed to rise to her feet, swaying slightly. If these were more of Haakon's men, returning to ensure no survivors remained, she would face them standing. She would look into their eyes as they struck her down to join her family. 6 riders appeared around the bend in the coastal path, heavily furred against the winter cold, their mounts leaving steaming trails of breath in the frigid air. They slowed at the sight of the devastated village, hands moving to weapons with practiced readiness. The leader, a massive figure on a steel-gray stallion, raised his hand for the others to halt. He removed his helm, revealing a face weathered by sea and sun, framed by a thick beard that had gone entirely silver, though he appeared no more than 40 winters old. His eyes, sharp as a falcon's, surveyed the destruction before settling on Sigrid, the lone figure standing amid the carnage. He dismounted with surprising grace for such a large man, and approached her slowly, as one might a wounded animal that could either flee or attack. He stopped several paces away, close enough to speak without shouting. far enough to avoid appearing threatening. "I am Ragnar Thorson of Skyfell," he said, his deep voice carrying clearly in the still air. "Called Graybeard since my 30th winter, when battle shock turned my beard from red to silver in a single night." He gestured to the devastation around them. "Who has done this? And how do you alone stand among so many fallen?" Sigrid met his gaze directly, too numb for fear. "I am Sigrid Freyasdottir of Ravnfjord. Or I was until last night, when Jarl Haakon's men razed our settlement and slaughtered our people." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears, as if someone else spoke through her lips. "And why were you spared?" Ragnar asked, his tone neither accusing nor suspicious, merely seeking to understand. "I was not with them when it began," Sigrid replied. Her hand moved unconsciously to touch the silver, streaks in her hair, now fully visible with her hood fallen back. "I was at the sacred grove, seeking the goddess's counsel after Jarl Haakon's son rejected me as his bride upon seeing this silver mark." Something flickered in Ragnar's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. He studied her for a long moment, then looked again at the destroyed village. "Haakon moves earlier than expected," he murmured, almost to himself. To Sigrid, he added, "My scouts reported that he sought alliance with your people through marriage. I see now it was merely a ruse to gain entry to your defenses." "You know of Jarl Haakon?" Sigrid asked, a spark of interest penetrating her fog. "Of grief. All too well," Ragnar replied grimly. "His ambitions grow with each season. He seeks to control the entire northern coastline before spring raids begin. Your village stood in a strategic position he coveted." He turned, gesturing for one of his men to approach. "We ride to challenge Haakon's expansion," he explained as his lieutenant joined them. "We are too few today, but we did not expect to find him moving so boldly so soon." The weight of exhaustion and exposure suddenly descended on Sigrid. The slight renewal of focus that conversation had provided began to fade, her vision narrowing as her knees buckled beneath her. Ragnar moved with surprising swiftness for such a large man, catching her before she crumpled to the ground. His hands, despite their size and obvious strength, supported her with unexpected gentleness. "She's half frozen," he told his lieutenant, "and likely has taken neither food nor water since before the attack." Through dimming consciousness, Sigrid felt herself being lifted, then the warmth of furs being wrapped around her. Ragnar's voice seemed to come from an increasing distance as he issued commands to his men. "Back to Skyfell. Prepare the healer's house. No time to bury so many. Return with proper force after—" As darkness claimed her, Sigrid's last sensory impression was of movement, the rhythm of a horse beneath her, and solid arms holding her securely against a broad chest. For the first time since the horror began, she felt something unexpected penetrate her grief and shock. She felt safe. Sigrid drifted in and out of consciousness as Ragnar's party rode northward. Wrapped in thick furs against the biting cold, cradled against the chieftain's broad chest, she existed in a twilight state between awareness and oblivion. The steady rhythm of hoofbeats on packed snow and the occasional murmur of men's voices formed a backdrop to her fragmented thoughts. Images flashed behind her closed eyelids, her mother's face as she urged Sigrid to flee, her father standing, proud against Jarl Haakon's insults, flames consuming the only home she had ever known. Each memory brought fresh waves of grief that threatened to pull her back into the darkness. "Stay with us, Freyasdottir," Ragnar's deep voice rumbled above her occasionally. "Skyfell lies just beyond the next ridge. There is warmth and healing waiting." Whether hours or mere moments passed, she could not tell. The gray winter sky offered no guidance, the weak northern sun making only the briefest appearance before surrendering again to heavy clouds pregnant with snow. The terrain gradually changed, the coastal path giving way to pine forest, then opening to a sheltered valley nestled between protective mountains. The air grew less bitter as they descended into this natural fortress, sheltered from the worst of the sea winds. Sky fell, Ragnar announced as they crested a final rise. Sigrid forced, her eyes open, struggling to focus on the settlement spread below them. Unlike the modest fishing village of her birth, Skyfell was substantial. Dozens of longhouses arranged in concentric circles around a massive central hall. Smoke rose from numerous hearth fires, and even from this distance, she could see people moving purposefully between buildings. A small lake, partially frozen, gleamed at the settlement's edge, and beyond it, several large fields lay dormant under winter snow. This was no mere village, but the seat of significant power, a chieftain's stronghold that controlled the fertile. Inland valley, and judging by the ships she glimpsed pulled onto shore at the lake's edge, maintained water access through a river that must connect to the sea. "My people have dwelled here for 7 generations," Ragnar explained, noting her interest. "The mountains guard our flanks. The lake provides fish when the sea is impassable, and the valley yields enough grain and livestock to sustain us through the harshest winters." As they descended toward the settlement, Sigrid became aware of figures, gathering to meet them, first curious children who ran alongside the horses, then adults who emerged from various buildings as word of the rider's return spread. Their expressions shifted from welcome to concern as they noted the grim faces of Ragnar's men and the fur-wrapped figure the chieftain himself carried. A woman stepped forward as they reached the central clearing, tall and straight-backed despite her advanced years, her silver hair elaborately braided with raven feathers and bone beads that marked her as someone of significant status. Her piercing gaze moved from Ragnar to Sigrid and back again, questions evident in her expression. "Mother," Ragnar acknowledged with respectful formality. "Prepare the healer's house. Ravnfjord is no more. Haakon's men have destroyed it utterly. This woman alone survived." The elder woman's eyes widened slightly, but she issued orders with calm authority to those nearby. Several younger women hurried ahead toward a structure set slightly apart from the others. "Gita Stormbringer," Ragnar explained to Sigrid as he dismounted carefully, still cradling her in his arms. "My mother, our settlement's head healer, and keeper of the old ways. You will be in capable hands." The healer's house was unlike any dwelling Sigrid had seen before. Circular, rather than the traditional long rectangular shape of Norse homes, its walls were adorned with intricate carvings of healing herbs, protective runes, and the animals sacred to air, goddess of healing. Inside, the single room was warm and fragrant with hanging bundles of dried plants and simmering preparations. A fire burned in a central hearth, its smoke rising through an opening in the conical roof. Ragnar placed Sigrid carefully on a bed of soft furs near the fire. Gita entered moments later, followed by 2 younger women carrying water, clean cloths, and various pouches. "Leave us," the elder woman commanded, her tone brooking no argument from her son. "This is women's work now." Ragnar hesitated, his gaze lingering on Sigrid with an expression she was too weary to interpret. "I will return later," he said, addressing her directly. "Rest and heal, Freyasdottir. You are safe within these walls." As the door closed behind him, Gita approached, her keen eyes assessing Sigrid with the practiced efficiency of one who had tended countless injured and ill. "So," she said, her voice neither warm nor cold, but measured and practical, "you are the lone survivor of Ravnfjord. My son did not mention your name." "Sigrid Freyasdottir," she managed to reply, her voice barely above a whisper. Gita nodded, as if confirming something to herself. "Freya's blessing is evident," she remarked, reaching out to touch the silver streaks in Sigrid's hair with surprising gentleness. "The goddess marks those she claims in special ways." Before Sigrid could respond to this unexpected interpretation of her distinctive coloring, Gita had begun the process of treating her for exposure and shock. Warmed herbal infusions were pressed to her lips, soothing salves applied to frost-nipped fingers and cheeks, layers of chilled clothing replaced with warm, dry garments. Throughout the careful ministrations, Gita maintained a steady stream of Questions. Some about Sigrid's physical state, others about the attack on Ravnfjord. Sigrid answered as best she could through the fog of exhaustion, sensing that the healer's interrogation served both medical and political purposes. So, Haakon used the marriage negotiation as a ruse to gain access to your defenses, Gita summarized, when Sigrid had recounted the events leading to the massacre. And your rejection, because of these silver strands, provided his convenient excuse. The older woman's expression grew thoughtful as she worked, grinding herbs in a stone mortar. Haakon plays a dangerous game. He moves against the smaller coastal settlements one by one, eliminating any who might ally against him. Your father was wise to negotiate marriage rather than face Haakon's forces directly, but it merely postponed the inevitable. You knew my father? Sigrid asked, surprise momentarily overriding her grief. Gita's weathered face revealed a flash of something like sorrow before returning to its usual composed state. I knew of Thorvald Grimson. He was respected among the coastal settlements for his fair trading and skilled shipbuilding. His loss will be felt beyond Ravnfjord. She handed Sigrid a wooden cup containing a dark liquid that smelled of honey and unfamiliar herbs. Drink. It will help you sleep without dreams. Your body and spirit need rest to begin healing. Sigrid hesitated only briefly before accepting the draft. Whether she lived or died now seemed of little consequence, but something in the older woman's steady gaze suggested she had survived her own griefs and would expect no less of Sigrid. The liquid was surprisingly pleasant, sweet with honey but with complex undertones of herbs both bitter and aromatic. Warmth spread through Sigrid's body almost immediately, followed by a heaviness in her limbs that made even keeping her eyes open a struggle. Rest now. Gita's voice seemed to come from increasingly far away. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. As consciousness slipped away, Sigrid's last coherent thought was a question that would follow her into slumber. Why would a powerful chieftain like Ragnar Graybeard concern himself with the sole survivor of a destroyed settlement? What value could a dishonored, silver-haired bride possibly hold in the complex power struggles of the northern kingdoms? Sigrid awakened to unfamiliar surroundings, momentarily disoriented by the circular walls and the sound of women's voices. Nearby. For one blessed instant, memory remained at bay. Then reality crashed over her with devastating force. Ravnfjord destroyed, her parents murdered, her entire world reduced to smoking ruins in a single night. A young woman with honey-colored braids noticed she was awake and approached with a wooden cup. Grandmother said to give you this when you woke, she explained, her curious gaze lingering on Sigrid's silver-streaked hair. I'm Thera, Ragnar's daughter. Sigrid accepted the cup, studying the chieftain's daughter as she sipped the mild herbal tea. Thera appeared close to her own age, perhaps a year or two younger, with her father's direct gaze but softer features. She wore practical woolen garments adorned with intricate tablet weaving at the edges, marking her as both highborn and skilled in women's crafts. How long have I slept? Sigrid asked, her voice stronger than she expected. A full day and night, Thyra replied. Grandmother's sleeping draught is powerful. She said your body needed time to recover from the cold and shock. Before Sigrid could ask further questions, the door opened, admitting Gita along with a blast of cold air. The elder woman carried several bundles of dried plants and a small leather sack that clinked with the sound of stones or bones used for divination. Good, you're awake, she observed, setting her burdens on a work table. How do you feel? The question seemed impossible to answer. Physically, Sigrid recognized she was improved. Warmth had returned to her limbs. The biting pain of exposure had subsided. Her thoughts were clearer. But beneath these surface improvements lay a yawning chasm of loss so profound she could not begin to articulate it. I can stand, she replied finally, demonstrating by rising carefully from the bed of furs. Her legs trembled slightly but supported her. Gita nodded, accepting this practical assessment. Good. My son wishes to speak with you once you've broken your fast. The council gathers at midday to discuss Haakon's actions and what they may mean for the northern settlements. Why would the council wish to hear from me? Sigrid asked, genuinely perplexed. I have nothing to offer beyond what I've already told you. You are the last voice of Ravnfjord, Gyda replied simply. The last witness to Haakon's treachery. That holds significance. After a simple meal of bread, smoked fish, and more herbal tea, Thyra provided clean clothing, a sturdy woolen dress in deep blue with simple embroidery at the neck and sleeves, warm leggings, and soft indoor shoes. These were mine before I outgrew them last winter, she explained. They should fit. Well enough until proper garments can be made for you. The unexpected kindness brought tears to Sigrid's eyes for the first time since the massacre. She had wept from shock and fear during the attack, but afterward, grief had frozen within her like the ice on the fjord. This small gesture of normalcy, the simple provision of clothing, the assumption of continued life, somehow penetrated that frozen grief. Thyra pretended not to notice the tears, keeping up a stream of practical conversation as she helped Sigrid arrange her hair, freshly washed, with herb-scented soap, into a simple style appropriate for an unmarried woman of status. The silver streaks, rather than being hidden as her mother had advised, were arranged to be visible at her temples and throughout one thick braid. Grandmother says Freya's mark should be displayed with pride, not hidden like a shame, Thyra remarked as she worked. Her fingers paused briefly in their task. Is it true that your hair turned silver after you nearly drowned? Sigrid nodded. Last winter I fell through ice while gathering reeds for basket making. The cold seized me so quickly I couldn't swim. My father pulled me out, but I had stopped breathing. She touched the silver strands. When I recovered, these appeared. Some in our village took it as an ill omen, but my grandmother, before she died, said it marked me as touched by the gods. Grandmother Gyda would agree with yours, Thyra replied. She says those marked by the gods are destined for significant paths, though rarely easy ones. When Sigrid was deemed presentable, Thyra led her from the healer's house toward the great hall at the settlement's center. Outside, Skyfell buzzed with activity, people moving purposefully between buildings, smoke rising from forges and cooking fires. Children engaged in mock battles with wooden swords under the watchful eye of a grizzled warrior missing one hand. Despite her grief, Sigrid could not help noting the differences between this prosperous inland settlement and her own modest fishing village. Here, wealth was evident in the intricately carved gables of the buildings, the quality of clothing worn even by common folk, and the abundance of livestock in pens near the outskirts. More striking was the sense of security. While all Norse settlements maintained warriors and defenses, Skyfell's inhabitants moved with the confidence of those long accustomed to safety within their walls. The great hall stood at the precise center of the settlement, its massive wooden doors carved with scenes of battles and feasts. 2 guards flanked the entrance, their spears crossed to block entry until Thyra identified herself and her companion. The council already gathers, one guard informed her. The chieftain awaits the survivor from Ravnfjord. Inside, the hall dwarfed the one where Sigrid had experienced her humiliation just days earlier. Massive wooden pillars carved with the likenesses of gods and heroes supported a soaring roof. A central hearth stretched nearly the full length of the building, with multiple fires burning at intervals. And at the far end, seated on a high chair carved with wolves and ravens, sat Ragnar Graybeard. In the daylight, no longer obscured by furs and the haze of her own suffering, the chieftain's appearance was even more striking than Sigrid had first registered. Tall and broad-shouldered, he dominated the gathering through physical presence, alone. His silver beard, neatly trimmed and adorned with small decorative beads, contrasted sharply with features that suggested a man in his prime rather than elderhood. But it was his eyes that commanded attention. Gray as the winter sea and just as unfathomable. Those eyes found Sigrid immediately as she entered, assessing her improved condition with evident satisfaction. He gestured for her to approach the council. 7 men and 3 women seated on benches, arranged in a semicircle before the high seat. Sigrid Freyasdottir of Ravnfjord, Ragnar announced formally as she reached the open space before the council. Last survivor of Jarl Haakon's treachery, we have brought you here to bear witness to what you saw, that all may understand the threat now moving against the free settlements of the north. Sigrid felt the weight of every gaze upon her, some curious, others sympathetic, a few openly skeptical. Clearly, not all of Ragnar's council welcomed her presence or accepted her account without question. A heavy-set man with a gray-streaked red beard spoke first, his tone brusque. How do we know this woman speaks truth? Perhaps Ravnfjord rebelled against rightful authority. Perhaps they provoked Haakon's response. My father negotiated in good faith with Jarl Haakon, Sigrid replied, her voice stronger than she had anticipated. Indignation burned through grief, lending her words clarity and force. Our settlement offered no threat or provocation. We were a fishing village with modest defenses, seeking peaceful alliance through marriage. Yet you were rejected as bride, observed an older woman wearing the symbols of a vulva, a seeress. Because of this. She gestured to Sigrid's silver-streaked hair. Yes. Sigrid lifted her chin slightly. Haakon's son called it a curse, an ill omen. He dissolved the marriage contract on the spot, and conveniently attacked while your people were gathered for the feast, Ragnar added grimly. Their defenses lowered, their warriors unprepared. A younger council member leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. Haakon has taken 3 coastal settlements in the past year. Each time he claimed provocation, theft of livestock, harboring of criminals, refusal to pay tribute. Each time he left no survivors to contest his version of events. Until now, Ragnar said, his gaze returning to Sigrid, now we have a witness. The implications of this statement hung in the air. Sigrid suddenly understood her value to these people, not as a person deserving compassion, but as a political tool in their struggle against Jarl Haakon's expanding influence. What would you have me do? She asked directly, addressing Ragnar. I have lost everything. My testimony alone cannot stand against a powerful Jarl with warriors and wealth at his command. Ragnar's expression revealed nothing of his thoughts as he studied her for a long moment. Then, surprising everyone, he rose from his high seat and descended the 3 steps to stand before her. You underestimate the power of truth spoken by one who has nothing left to lose, he said, his voice pitched for her ears alone. Louder, addressing the entire council, he continued. Sigrid Freyasdottir will remain under Skyfell's protection. When the spring thing gathers, she will speak before the assembled leaders of all northern settlements. Her testimony, combined with the pattern of Haakon's conquests, will expose his ambitions for what they are, not justified responses to provocation, but calculated steps toward claiming the high kingship for himself. The announcement prompted immediate discussion among council members, some voicing support, others raising concerns about provoking Haakon directly. Through it all, Sigrid stood motionless, trying to process the future Ragnar had just outlined. For her, months in this strange settlement, culminating in public testimony that would make her Haakon's sworn enemy, if he did not already consider her such as the sole survivor of his massacre. You ask much of me, she said finally when there was a lull in the debate. I do, Ragnar acknowledged without apology. But what other path lies before you, Freyasdottir? Where else might you go? Who else would stand between you and Haakon's men when they learn a witness escaped their swords? The brutal practicality of his questions silenced any further protest Sigrid might have made. He was right, of course. She had no family remaining, no resources, no protection beyond what Skyfell offered. The silver in her hair, once merely an unusual feature, then a source of rejection and shame, now marked her as uniquely valuable in the power struggles between settlements. I will speak truth at the thing, she agreed finally. For my father's honor and for justice, not for political advantage. Something like approval flickered in Ragnar's expression. Well said. He turned back to the council. It is decided then. Until the spring gathering, Sigrid Freyasdottir remains under my personal protection as guest friend of Skyfell. Any harm to her will be answered as harm to my own blood. This formal declaration, stronger than Sigrid had anticipated, raised eyebrows among several council members. Guest rights were sacred among their people, but personal protection and equation with bloodkin suggested a status beyond mere political asylum. Before anyone could question this pronouncement, the hall doors burst open, admitting a snow-covered warrior who rushed forward to kneel before Ragnar. "Chieftain," he gasped, clearly having ridden hard through difficult conditions. Scouts report movement from Haakon's settlement. Warriors gathering, ships being prepared despite the season. They appear to be readying for a significant expedition. The council erupted in concerned murmurs. Winter raids were rare. The harsh weather made sea travel treacherous and land journeys slow. Only the most desperate or ambitious would risk such an undertaking. "How many warriors?" Ragnar demanded. "At least 100, possibly more," the scout replied. "And they gather supplies for a sustained campaign, not a simple raid." Ragnar's expression hardened. He moves faster than I anticipated. With Ravnfjord eliminated, he now turns his attention inland. His gaze swept the council. We must prepare for the possibility that Skyfell itself may be his target. As the council dissolved into urgent discussion of defenses and potential alliances, Sigrid found herself forgotten in the immediate crisis. She stood aside, watching as Ragnar issued rapid orders for messengers to be sent to allied settlements and for Skyfell's defenses to be strengthened. It was Gyda who finally approached her, appearing silently at her side like a shadow. "Come," the elder woman said without preamble. "The men will bluster and plan their defenses, but there are preparations of a different sort that must be made." "What preparations?" Sigrid asked, following the healer toward the door. Gyda's smile held little warmth but considerable determination. "If war comes to Skyfell, every hand must be ready to contribute, including yours, Freyasdottir. It is time you learned the deeper healing arts my bloodline has maintained since before the ancestors settled these lands." As they stepped outside into the bitter cold, Sigrid cast one last glance back at Ragnar, now bent over maps with his warriors. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, and something unspoken passed between them. A recognition, perhaps, that fate had bound their paths together in ways neither had anticipated. Then the great hall doors closed behind her, and Sigrid followed Gyda into a future as uncertain as the steel-gray skies above Skyfell, where snow clouds gathered like an army preparing to descend upon the land. The days that followed brought a rhythm to Sigrid's shattered life. Each morning, she worked alongside Gyda, learning the properties of healing herbs and the preparation of salves, poultices, and medicinal teas. The elder woman proved a demanding but patient teacher, seemingly intent on transferring decades of knowledge in the shortest possible time. "Your hands are skilled," Gyda observed on the third day, as Sigrid deftly sorted through a basket of dried plants, separating them by type with practiced efficiency. "You've worked with herbs before?" "My mother was our village's midwife," Sigrid replied, the pain of mentioning her parents still fresh but becoming bearable through repetition. "She taught me simple remedies and preparations since I was a child." Gyda nodded with satisfaction. "It shows. You have the touch, the instinct for healing that cannot be taught, only nurtured." These quiet mornings in the healer's house provided a sanctuary from the bustling preparations that consumed the rest of Skyfell. Warriors trained daily in the central square, smiths worked through the night repairing weapons and forging new ones, and messengers arrived regularly with news of settlements aligning themselves either with Ragnar or with Jarl Haakon in the coming conflict. In the afternoons, Thyra would appear to claim Sigrid for what she called practical education, introducing her to the settlement's organization, the key families, and the skills that sustained Skyfell through the harsh northerns. Winters. Unlike coastal Ravnfjord, which depended primarily on fishing and trade, this inland community balanced agriculture, animal husbandry, hunting, and crafts with meticulous planning that impressed Sigrid despite her grief. Father believes everyone should understand how our community functions, Thyra explained as they toured the storage buildings where winter provisions were meticulously organized. He says knowledge shared is power multiplied. Sigrid found herself watching Ragnar whenever their paths crossed, trying to reconcile the fearsome warrior who commanded such respect with the man who had shown such gentleness when finding her amidst the ruins of her village. He seemed always in motion, consulting with scouts, training younger warriors, mediating disputes among his people, and planning defenses against the threat that loomed from the south. Yet somehow, he found moments to inquire after her well-being, appearing unexpectedly in the healer's house or beside the loom where Thyra had begun teaching her the settlement's distinctive weaving patterns. "You adapt quickly, Freyasdottir," he observed 10 days after her arrival, finding her grinding herbs in the healer's house, her hands already showing the confident movements of one familiar with the task. "My mother says you have natural talent for the healing arts." "Your mother is generous with her knowledge," Sigrid replied, keeping her eyes on her work to hide the unexpected flush his presence brought to her cheeks. "As is your daughter with her friendship." Ragnar studied her for a moment, his silver beard catching the light from the nearby fire. "Do you still dream of it? The attack?" The blunt question startled her into meeting his gaze. "Yes," she admitted. "Every night. But Gyda's sleeping draft helps. The dreams come, but they cannot hold me." He nodded, unsurprised. "Battle dreams fade slowly. I still dream of my first raid. 30 years past now." His hand moved unconsciously to touch his silver beard. "Some experiences mark us both inside and out." Before Sigrid could respond to this unexpected personal revelation, a horn blast echoed through the settlement, 3 short bursts followed by one long note. "Riders approaching," Ragnar explained, already moving toward the door. "From the east, not the south. Likely messengers from Freihold." He paused briefly. "Join us in the great hall when they deliver their news. As Ravnfjord's witness, you should hear what alliances form against Haakon." By the time Sigrid reached the great hall, guided by Thyra, the messengers had already arrived. 3 warriors bearing the eagle emblem of Freihold, a powerful settlement 2 days' ride eastward. Their leader, a stern-faced woman whose braided hair showed as much silver as gold, stood before Ragnar's high seat delivering her message with formal precision. "Jarl Astrid of Freihold sends greetings to Ragnar Graybeard of Skyfell and pledges 20 shields to your defense, should Haakon move against you as we expect," she announced. "Furthermore, she offers sanctuary to your people if the need arises, though she hopes your walls stand firm." Murmurs of approval spread through the gathered crowd. An alliance with Freihold significantly strengthened Skyfell's position. The messenger continued. "In return, Jarl Astrid asks only that when the Spring Thing convenes, you support her proposal to form a defensive council of northern settlements, with equal voice given to all participating communities regardless of size." Ragnar stroked his beard thoughtfully. "A wise proposal, and one I would have suggested myself had Astrid not acted first." He glanced briefly towards Sigrid, standing with Thyra near the edge of the gathering. "Tell your Jarl that Skyfell accepts both her offer of shields and her proposal for the thing. Add that we have evidence that may unite even more settlements against Haakon's ambitions." The messenger's gaze followed Ragnar's to Sigrid, narrowing slightly as she noted the distinctive silver streaks. "The survivor from Ravnfjord," she said. Not a question, but a recognition. "Word travels even in winter. Haakon's men boast openly of cleansing the coast of independent villages, claiming the people refused proper tribute." "A lie," Sigrid said clearly, the words escaping before she could consider their wisdom. All eyes turned to her as she stepped forward, chin raised. Ravnfjord negotiated in good faith. We prepared a wedding feast, not a rebellion. The messenger assessed her with a warrior's measuring gaze. Then you are indeed valuable, Ravnfjord survivor. Jarl Astrid will wish to hear your account directly. She turned back to Ragnar. With your permission, Chieftain, I would speak privately with this woman before returning to Freyhold. Ragnar's expression revealed nothing of his thoughts as he nodded agreement. Gyda's house would offer suitable privacy. My mother will attend as witness, as is proper. The conversation that followed in the healer's house was intense but brief. The messenger, who identified herself as Svanhild, shield sister to Jarl Astrid since childhood, questioned Sigrid closely about the events at Ravnfjord. Her demeanor, shifting from professional skepticism to cold anger as the full account unfolded. Haakon grows bolder than we anticipated, she said finally, accepting a horn of mead from Gyda. First he claims tribute disputes, then alleged theft, and now he uses a marriage negotiation as cover for slaughter. She studied Sigrid over the rim of her drinking horn. And all because of your silver hair? A rejection that became convenient excuse for violence already planned? The rejection was genuine, Sigrid replied, touching the silver strands self-consciously. Ivar Haakonsson's disgust needed no feigning. But yes, his father seized upon it immediately, too quickly for it not to have been anticipated. Svanhild nodded grimly. Astrid will want you at the spring thing. Your testimony carries weight that rumors and suspicions do not. She finished, her mead in one long swallow. Until then, you are fortunate to have found shelter with Ragnar Graybeard. His reputation for honor is matched only by his skill in battle. After the messengers departed, bearing Ragnar's formal acceptance of the alliance, Sigrid found herself summoned once more to the Great Hall. This time, only Ragnar and 3 of his closest advisors were present, gathered around a large table, where maps had been spread out, weighted at the corners with polished stones. Haakon's influence grows along the southern coast, one advisor was saying as Sigrid entered. 4 settlements have pledged shields to him in the past month alone. Some willingly, others through coercion. And 2 more destroyed entirely, like Ravnfjord, added another, a one-eyed man whose scarred face spoke of long experience in battle. Their locations are not random. He pointed to markings on the map. Each secured landing point controls access to inland routes. He's systematically securing his supply lines for a larger campaign. Ragnar looked up as Gyda escorted Sigrid to the table. Freyasdottir, he acknowledged with a nod. You know your coastline better than any map. Tell us, what natural harbors lie between Ravnfjord and North Point? He indicated a stretch of coastline on the worn parchment. Sigrid studied the map, recognizing the rough outline of her homeland despite the mapmaker's inaccuracies. 3 that could accommodate warships, she replied, pointing to locations. Here, where the river meets the sea, the entrance is narrow but deep. Here, sheltered by these islands, though dangerous in easterly winds. And here, below the granite, cliffs. The approach is hidden until you're nearly upon it. The advisors exchanged impressed glances at her detailed knowledge. Ragnar's expression remained impassive, but his eyes held approval. Your father taught you well, he observed. My father believed daughters should understand our world as thoroughly as sons, Sigrid replied, a brief smile flickering across her face at the memory. He said knowledge was the one treasure that could never be stolen. A wise man, Ragnar murmured. Louder to his advisors, he added, Mark these harbors. Send scouts if weather permits. We need to know which Haakon targets next. As the men bent to their task, Ragnar drew Sigrid slightly aside. The messengers from Freyhold brought troubling news beyond what was shared openly, he said quietly. Haakon has placed a price on your head, substantial enough to tempt even honorable men in hard times. Sigrid's blood ran cold. He knows I survived? He suspects someone escaped, Ragnar clarified. A thorough warlord would count bodies, Yours was not among them. His gray eyes held hers steadily. This changes your position here. You are no longer merely a witness to be protected until the thing, but a specific target Haakon seeks to eliminate. I've brought danger to your people, Sigrid said, distress evident in her voice. Perhaps I should— You misunderstand, Ragnar interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. I do not tell you this to suggest you leave. Quite the opposite. Skyfell has declared itself against Haakon by accepting Freyhold's alliance. Your presence or absence would not change his intentions toward us now. A hint of grim humor touched his features. But it does suggest we were right about your value as witness. Haakon would not waste resources hunting a traumatized girl unless her testimony truly threatened him. The realization was both terrifying and strangely empowering. Her survival was not merely inconvenient for Jarl Haakon, it was dangerous to him, to his carefully constructed justifications, to his ambitions for expansion. What would you have me do? She asked, echoing her question from the council meeting. Days earlier, but now with more resolve than resignation in her tone. Ragnar's expression softened slightly. Continue as you have been, learning our ways, building your strength, preparing to speak truth when the time comes. He hesitated briefly, then added, But now you must also learn to defend yourself. No one in Skyfell would betray you for Haakon's silver, but we cannot account for every traveler, trader, or visitor who might pass through before spring. Defend myself, Sigrid repeated, momentarily confused. You mean with weapons? With whatever tools suit your hand and mind, Ragnar confirmed. Thyra will begin your training tomorrow. My daughter may prefer the loom to the sword, but she is still my child, and one of our most skilled knife fighters. That night, alone in the small sleeping chamber that had been prepared for her adjoining the healer's house, Sigrid found sleep elusive despite Gyda's draft. The revelation that Haakon actively sought her death had crystallized something within her, transforming formless grief and shock into a harder, more focused emotion. She touched the silver strands in her hair, no longer viewing them as the mark of shame that had led to her rejection, but as the badge of survival that now made her dangerous to a powerful man's ambitions. For the first time since the massacre, she felt something beyond pain and loss stirring within her heart. It was not yet hope. That seemed too fragile a word for the ember kindling in her chest. It was something older, more primal. The determination, not merely to survive, but to become the instrument of justice for those who could no longer speak for themselves. Outside her window, snow began to fall, thick, silent flakes that would soon blanket Skyfell in pristine white. Winter still held the north firmly in its grip, but within Sigrid, something had begun to thaw. Hold the blade like this, Thyra instructed, adjusting Sigrid's grip on the short-bladed sayax. Fingers wrapped firmly but not rigid, you need control, without sacrificing flexibility. They stood in a cleared space behind the smithy where the packed snow had been trampled to a hard surface by daily practice. Steam rose from their bodies in the crisp air as Sigrid attempted to duplicate the defensive stance Thyra had demonstrated. Better, Thyra approved, circling her student with a critical eye. Remember, you won't overpower most attackers. Your advantages are speed and precision. A knife doesn't need to kill to disable, it only needs to strike the right targets. For the past week, these training sessions had become part of Sigrid's daily routine. Each morning with Gyda, learning the healer's arts, each afternoon with Thyra, learning to defend herself. The physical exertion had begun to transform her body, replacing the softness of a fishing village maiden with the wiry strength of a warrior. The wrist, Thyra continued, tapping her own, the inner thigh, the eyes. She pointed to each vulnerable area on her own body. Against a larger opponent, target these. Don't try for the killing blow unless you're certain you can deliver it. Sigrid nodded, committing the instructions to memory with the same concentration she applied to Gyda's lessons about medicinal plants. Both, she had come to understand, were forms of knowledge that could determine survival. They moved through a series of defensive positions, Thera attacking with controlled deliberation, while Sigrid practiced deflecting and countering. The Chieftain's daughter was a patient but uncompromising teacher, correcting every misstep immediately. "You think too much," she observed, after Sigrid hesitated during a particularly complex sequence. "Your mind grasps the movements, but your body hesitates. In real combat, that hesitation would mean death." "I know," Sigrid acknowledged, frustration evident in her voice. "It's just that you were raised to create life, not take it," Thera finished, her expression softening. "My mother says all healers struggle with this contradiction. But remember, defending yourself doesn't conflict with healing others. One makes the other possible." As they continued practicing, Sigrid became aware of being observed. Glancing toward the smithy entrance, she saw Ragnar standing in the shadows, his arms crossed over his broad chest, his eyes tracking their movements with analytical precision. Thera followed her gaze and smiled. "Father always watches new warriors train. He says the way someone fights reveals more about their character than years of conversation could." "And what does my fighting reveal?" Sigrid asked, curious despite her embarrassment at being observed. Thera laughed. "You should ask him yourself, when you're ready to hear the truth. Father never spares feelings when assessing combat skills." She adopted a mock-stern expression and deepened her voice in imitation of Ragnar. "Honesty in training prevents death in battle." As if summoned by their discussion, Ragnar approached, his boots crunching in the snow. "Enough for today," he declared, nodding approval to his daughter. "Sigrid has council matters to attend to." Thera raised an eyebrow but didn't question her. Father's interruption. She accepted the practice knife from Sigrid with a respectful nod. "Same time tomorrow. Practice the wrist deflection before then. Your left side still drops when you counter." Once Thera had departed, Ragnar gestured for Sigrid to follow him. "Walk with me," he said, not quite a command but more than a request. "There are matters we should discuss away from the settlement's ears." They followed a path that wound behind the longhouses toward the frozen lake that bordered Skyfell's eastern edge. The late afternoon sun cast long blue shadows across the snow, and their breath formed clouds in the chill air. Ragnar's pace was deliberately measured, allowing Sigrid to keep up without strain despite his much longer stride. "You've adapted well," he observed after they had walked in silence for several minutes. "Gaida says you've mastered treatments that usually take seasons to learn. Thera reports similar progress with weapons training." "I have good teachers," Sigrid replied, uncertain where this conversation was heading. "True, but the student must be capable of learning." They reached the lake shore, where wind had swept portions of the ice clear of snow, creating a mirror-like surface that reflected the cloudless sky. Ragnar stopped, gazing out across the frozen expanse. "A scout returned this morning from the coastal regions. Haakon's forces have taken Eastport." Sigrid's breath caught. Eastport was the largest settlement between Ravnfjord and North Point, a prosperous trading center with substantial defenses. "How? They should have been able to withstand a siege for months." "There was no siege," Ragnar replied grimly. "They opened their gates willingly. Haakon offered their chieftain a choice, alliance or annihilation. After what happened at Ravnfjord, they chose survival. The implications were clear. More settlements would follow Eastport's example, swelling Haakon's forces while isolating those who stood against him. "He's creating a narrative," Sigrid said, the political strategy suddenly clear to her. Either settlements rise against him and are destroyed as rebels, or they join him and legitimize his leadership. Ragnar looked at her with newfound respect. "Precisely. By spring, he'll have enough allied chieftains to claim the high kingship at the Thing. Those who oppose him will appear as the aggressors, refusing to accept the will of the majority. Unless someone challenges the foundation of his claim," Sigrid concluded, Someone who can prove his methods involve treachery rather than legitimate conquest. Someone like you? Ragnar turned to face her fully. But Haakon knows this as well. The scout brought other news. The price on your head has doubled, and details of your appearance have spread to every settlement within 5 days' journey. His eyes lingered on her silver-streaked hair. You are too distinctive to hide easily, Freyasdottir. The reality of her situation settled over Sigrid like a physical weight. So I am trapped here until the thing? Unable to leave Skyfell's protection without risking capture or death? That would be the cautious path, Ragnar agreed. But I have never believed caution wins wars. He reached inside his heavy cloak and withdrew an object wrapped in soft leather, offering it to her. This is why I sought you out today. Sigrid unwrapped the bundle carefully. Inside lay a knife unlike any she had seen before. Shorter than a sword but longer than the sayak she had been practicing with. The blade gleamed with a distinctive pattern of light and dark ripples in the metal, and the hilt was wrapped in fine leather with a pommel of polished amber. Pattern-welded steel, Ragnar explained, watching her examine the weapon. Forged by Skyfell's master smith from metals brought from the eastern lands, the blade will never dull with proper care. It's beautiful, Sigrid said truthfully, testing. The balance of the knife in her hand as Thera had taught her. It felt like an extension of her arm, perfectly weighted. But I don't understand. Why give me such a valuable weapon when I'm still learning basic techniques? Because you may need it sooner than we planned. Ragnar's expression grew serious. The messenger from Freyhold returns tomorrow with an escort of Astrid's best warriors. She requests that you accompany them back to her settlement to provide testimony before her council. Sigrid looked up sharply. Leave Skyfell? But you just said that Haakon's men hunt for you, yes. Ragnar nodded. But the route to Freyhold passes through territories loyal to neither Haakon nor myself. The escort will be strong, and Astrid's warriors are among the most respected in the northern kingdoms. If we're to build a coalition against Haakon, your story must be heard by more than just Skyfell's council. The reasoning was sound, but fear still flickered through Sigrid's chest. She had begun to feel secure within Skyfell's walls, protected by Ragnar's influence and Gyda's wisdom. The thought of venturing out, becoming vulnerable again to Haakon's reach, made her palm sweat against the knife's hilt. You don't have to, except, Ragnar added, noting her hesitation. No one would think less of you for remaining here until the thing. The risk is considerable. Sigrid looked down at the magnificent blade in her hands, then at the frozen lake stretching before them like a field of diamonds in the late afternoon light. Beyond that, ice lay more settlements, more people who needed to understand Haakon's true nature before they too became victims or unwilling allies. If I remain hidden, she said slowly, I remain merely a rumor, a survivor whose account can be dismissed as fantasy or exaggeration. She looked up at Ragnar, finding resolve in his steady gaze. But if I speak directly to other chieftains, if they hear my testimony and look into my eyes as I describe what Haakon did, they will believe, Ragnar finished, and they will stand with us when the time comes. The decision crystallized in Sigrid's mind with surprising clarity. I'll go, she said, sliding the knife into the sheath that accompanied it and securing it to her belt as Thyra had taught her. But I have one condition. Ragnar raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement crossing his features. The rescued dictates terms to her rescuer? The witness does, Sigrid corrected, a new confidence in her voice. I want Thera to accompany me to Freyhold, not just as protection, but as someone who can vouch for my character to Jarl Astrid. A woman will understand another woman's testimony differently than men might. Ragnar stroked his silver beard thoughtfully. Thyra has not traveled far from Skyfell before. Her mother's death left her hesitant to venture beyond our walls. A flash of old grief crossed his features. But perhaps it's time she too stepped into a larger world. She has grown too comfortable as the chieftain's daughter. She's a skilled fighter and a loyal friend, Sigrid said. I would trust her at my back. As would I, Ragnar agreed. He studied Sigrid with an intensity that made her both uncomfortable and oddly exhilarated. You are not the same woman I found standing amidst the ruins of Ravnfjord, Sigrid Freyasdottir. No, she agreed, turning the amber pommel of her new knife so it caught the last rays of sunlight. That woman died with her village. I am becoming someone new, someone forged in grief but tempered with purpose. Ragnar nodded approval. Well said. The gods mark those they favor not to burden them, but to prepare them for extraordinary paths. His hand moved briefly toward her silver-streaked hair but stopped short of touching it. We leave at first light tomorrow. Jarl Astrid's warriors will be eager to return home. We? Sigrid questioned, surprised. You're accompanying us to Freyhold? Rare smile crossed Ragnar's face, transforming his stern features. Did you think I would entrust both my daughter and Haakon's most wanted witness to others' protection? Some matters a chieftain must oversee personally. That evening, as Sigrid packed the few belongings she had accumulated during her stay at Skyfell, Gyda visited her chamber. The elder woman carried a small wooden box carved with protective runes. For your journey, she said, placing it in Sigrid's hands. Healing herbs and salves that may prove useful. The road to Freyhold crosses high ground where weather can turn treacherous quickly. Sigrid accepted the gift with genuine gratitude. Thank you for all you've taught me. I feel as though I've only begun to learn what you have to offer. Knowledge once given cannot be taken back, Gyda replied with her characteristic directness. What I've shared, you now carry within you, whether we meet again or not. She studied Sigrid with her penetrating gaze. You understand why my son takes such interest in your safety? The question caught Sigrid off guard. I'm valuable as a witness against Haakon, she replied carefully. My testimony could help unite the northern settlements against his aggression. Gyda made a dismissive sound. That's the reason he gives the counsel, yes. But Ragnar Graybeard has never been one to act from political calculation alone. She touched one of the silver streaks in Sigrid's hair. You've noticed the color of his beard? How it turned from red to silver in a single night. Sigrid nodded. He mentioned it was from battle shock, though he didn't explain further. Not just any battle, Gyda said, her voice softer than Sigrid had ever heard it. 30 years ago, Ragnar's war party was ambushed returning from a raid. Most were killed. He survived by hiding beneath the bodies of his fallen comrades, including his 2 brothers and his closest friend. He was 20 summers old. The parallel to Sigrid's own experience at Ravnfjord was unmistakable. He sees himself in me, she realized aloud, the sole survivor marked by trauma. He sees possibility, Gyda corrected. When Ragnar returned from that ambush, his beard gone silver with grief, many whispered that the gods had cursed him. Instead, he transformed that mark into his identity, Graybeard, the chieftain whose wisdom came from suffering. Her eyes held Sigrid steadily. He believes you capable of similar transformation, not merely surviving Ravnfjord, but becoming stronger because of it. And do you share his belief? Sigrid asked, genuinely curious about the healer's assessment. Gyda's weathered face revealed a rare smile. I believe the goddess Freya chooses her instruments carefully. Whether that instrument becomes a weapon or a healing tool depends on the hands that shape it. She moved toward the door. Sleep well. Sigrid Freyasdottir. Dawn comes early, and the journey to Freyhold will test more than your endurance. After Gyda departed, Sigrid stood at her small window, gazing out at Skyfell under moonlight. Preparations for tomorrow's journey continued despite the late hour, horses being readied, provisions packed, weapons sharpened. Among the busy figures, she spotted Ragnar's distinctive form directing the activities, seemingly tireless despite the day's events. Her hand moved to touch the knife at her belt, his gift, a symbol of both protection and expectation. The smooth amber pommel warmed beneath her fingers as if responding to her touch. Beyond Skyfell's walls lay danger, uncertainty, and the looming confrontation with Haakon's forces, but also purpose, a chance to speak truth against power, to honor those who had perished at Ravnfjord, to transform the silver in her hair from a mark of rejection into a banner of survival and strength. The path ahead seemed suddenly clear, illuminated not just by moonlight on snow, but by an inner certainty that had been growing since Ragnar first found her standing amid the ruins of her former life. She was Sigrid Freyasdottir, last daughter of Ravnfjord, marked by the goddess, and carrier of truth. And tomorrow, she would begin the journey that would either cement Haakon's power or help topple him from his blood-soaked ambitions. As if sensing her thoughts, the wind shifted, carrying the distant howl of wolves from the mountains beyond Skyfell. Not a warning, Sigrid decided, but a reminder. Even the gentlest creatures could bare their teeth when threatened, and she had been threatened to her very core. Dawn arrived with biting cold and clear skies as the travelers assembled in Skyfell's central square. 12 warriors, 6 from Freyhold, 6 of Ragnar's most trusted men, formed the protective detail that would accompany them eastward. The horses stamped impatiently, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air as servants secured the final provisions. Sigrid emerged from the healer's house dressed for the journey in practical layers of wool and fur, her new knife prominently displayed at her belt. Gyda had braided her hair in the traditional style of a shield maiden, with the silver streaks woven into a pattern that recalled Freya's falcon wings, both a declaration of the goddess's protection and a statement that Sigrid embraced rather than concealed her distinctive mark. Thyra joined her, similarly outfitted for travel but with the addition of a finely crafted bow and a quiver of arrows across her back. "Nervous?" she asked quietly, adjusting the straps of Sigrid's leather satchel containing Gyda's medicinal supplies. "Cautious," Sigrid replied with a half-smile. "Your father's teachings are starting to affect my thinking." "A promising development," Ragnar interjected, approaching on silent feet despite his size. He wore full battle gear, mail shirt beneath, layers of fur, his sword at his side, a round shield slung across his back. The silver beads in his beard gleamed in the early light. "Caution kept you alive at Ravnfjord. It may serve you equally well on this journey." The party departed as the sun crept above the eastern mountains, riding in formation through Skyfell's main gate. The settlement's people lined the path, some offering small tokens of protection to the travelers, others calling out traditional blessings for safe passage. Gyda stood apart from the crowd, her keen eyes following Sigrid until the party disappeared around the first bend in the forest trail. Their journey to Freyhold proved arduous but uneventful until the second day, when they encountered suspicious merchants at a highland shelter during a blizzard. Sigrid noticed their leader watching her silver-streaked hair with calculating interest that suggested he recognized her as Haakon's hunted survivor. Ragnar's warriors maintained vigilant watch through the night, and at dawn, they departed swiftly, pushing through the storm toward Freyhold's territory. By dusk, they reached the outer sentries of Jarl Astrid's domain. The patrol escorted them to the settlement where the Jarl herself, a formidable woman with silver-blonde braids and a cloak of wolf fur, awaited their arrival. "Sigrid Freyasdottir," Astrid acknowledged, using her name though they had never met. "You have traveled far and endured much. Freyhold offers you safe haven and the opportunity to share your testimony." That evening's welcome feast was interrupted by news that the suspicious merchants from the Highland shelter had followed them to Freyhold, claiming to have important information about Skyfell's chieftain. "Haakon's spies," Ragnar confirmed grimly. "They recognized Sigrid and now seek to undermine her testimony before it can be delivered." Jarl Astrid's expression hardened. "Then we adjust our strategy. The witness will deliver her testimony at first light, not just to my council as planned, but to representatives from all allied settlements within a day's ride. My messengers will depart tonight." That night, unable to sleep before her testimony, Sigrid stood at her chamber window watching guards patrol Freyhold's snow-covered grounds. A soft knock at her door revealed Ragnar, his expression concerned. In the dim torchlight, "You should be resting before tomorrow's council," he said gently. "Sleep eludes me," Sigrid admitted. "My mind keeps returning to what awaits tomorrow." Ragnar joined her at the window. "The hours before battle are always the most difficult, and make no mistake, tomorrow you enter a different kind of battle than you faced at Ravnfjord." "At Ravnfjord, I merely survived through chance," Sigrid said. "Tomorrow I must be more than lucky. I must be convincing." "You doubt your ability to speak truth persuasively?" "I doubt nothing about the truth itself," she replied. "But I know how powerful men dismiss women's voices. I was rejected as bride for this mark." Her hand touched the silver streaks in her hair. "How readily might I be rejected as witness for the same reason?" Ragnar's expression softened. "When I first saw you standing amidst the ruins of Ravnfjord, your silver-streaked hair was the first thing I noticed, not as a flaw, but as a sign of extraordinary strength." He turned to face her fully. "Ivar Håkonsson rejected what he was too blind to value properly. Tomorrow, you will stand before the council not despite this mark, but because of it. Because it is physical proof that the gods favor your survival. For a purpose. And what purpose do you believe they intended?" "To bring justice," he replied simply. "To be the voice for those silenced at Ravnfjord. To stand as living testimony that even Haakon's calculated treachery cannot extinguish truth." His hand moved from her hair to lightly cup her cheek. "And perhaps to bring healing to more than just yourself." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. The silver that marked them both, her hair, his beard, created a visible bond that neither could deny. Dawn brought the council gathering, where representatives from allied settlements filled Jarl Astrid's great hall beyond capacity. Sigrid wore clothing provided by Astrid, a dress of deep blue wool embroidered with protective symbols, with a ceremonial shawl decorated with silver thread that complemented her distinctive hair. At her belt hung the pattern-welded knife Ragnar had given her. Astrid led her to the speaker's circle at the hall's center. "Leaders of the northern settlements, we gather today to hear testimony regarding the destruction of Ravnfjord. Before you stands Sigrid Freyasdottir, sole survivor of the massacre, who comes under the protection of both Skyfell and Freyhold to share her account." Sigrid's voice carried clear and strong as she recounted the events. The marriage negotiation, Ivar's public rejection upon seeing her silver-streaked hair, her flight to the sacred grove, and the methodical slaughter that followed. Throughout her testimony, the silver streaks caught the light, seeming almost to glow as she stood within the speaker's circle. "This was no raid gone wrong," she declared. "No provocation met with excessive response. It was calculated extermination, planned in advance, using my rejection as convenient pretext for violence already intended." When she finished, the hall remained silent until Jarl Astrid stepped forward. "The witness has spoken. According to our traditions, the council may now question her account." An elderly chieftain with a staff of ashwood rose first. "Your testimony is compelling, Freyasdottir, but it remains one voice against Jarl Haakon's claim that Ravnfjord rebelled against rightful authority. What evidence beyond your words supports your version of events?" Before Sigrid could respond, the doors to the great hall burst open. A bloodied warrior staggered in, supported by two comrades. "Jarl Astrid," he gasped. "Haakon's forces move against North Point. 300 warriors with 20 ships." The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. North Point was the largest independent settlement remaining on the western coast. Its fall would give Haakon complete control of the shoreline. Astrid raised her hand for silence. "When did this attack begin?" 2 days past, the warrior replied. They came at dawn, without warning or declared grievance. North Point's chieftain sent us to seek aid before the walls were surrounded. The elder who had questioned Sigrid's testimony slowly sat down, his face ashen. North Point and Haakon exchanged peace oaths at last autumn's thing, he said quietly. This attack violates sacred bonds. Just as he violated the guest rights of marriage negotiation at Ravnfjord, Sigrid stated, her voice cutting through the commotion. The pattern is clear. Haakon uses diplomacy not to forge peace, but to lower defenses before he strikes. Ragnar stepped into the speaker's circle beside her. We face a choice as the free settlements of the north. Stand divided and fall one. Buy one to Haakon's ambitions. Or unite now, while we still have the strength to challenge him. Jarl Astrid nodded grimly. Freyhold will send warriors to North Point's aid. Who stands with us? One by one, the assembled leaders pledged support. Some with enthusiasm, others with reluctance born of fear, but each recognizing the truth Sigrid's testimony had revealed. Haakon's pattern of conquest would continue until none remained free, as the council transformed into a war meeting, with leaders discussing strategy and troop movements. Sigrid found herself momentarily forgotten. She stepped away from the speaker's circle, emotions conflicting within her. Relief that her testimony had been believed, satisfaction that action would be taken against Haakon, yet sorrow that more bloodshed would follow. Ragnar found her near, one of the Great Hall's support pillars, her fingers absently tracing the carved runes of protection that spiraled up the wooden surface. You succeeded beyond what we hoped, he said quietly. Your words united settlements that have quarreled for generations. Yet more will die before this ends, she replied, looking toward the wounded messenger. Yes, Ragnar acknowledged. But they will die in open battle rather than slaughtered in their beds like your kinsmen. There is honor in that difference. He studied her face. You carry no guilt for this war, Sigrid. Haakon's ambition lit this fire long before you survived to bear witness. 3 days later, Sigrid stood atop Freyhold's palisade wall, watching, as combined forces from 6 northern settlements prepared to march westward. 500 warriors had gathered. Not enough to defeat Haakon's larger army in direct confrontation, but sufficient to break North Point's siege and begin the resistance that would continue through winter into spring. Thyra joined her at the wall, dressed in leather armor with her bow across her back. Father says you're to remain here while we march to North Point, she said without preamble. Jarl Astrid has offered you permanent sanctuary in Freyhold. I know, Sigrid replied, her gaze fixed on Ragnar's silver-bearded figure directing the final preparations below. But I've made a different decision, Thyra raised an eyebrow. You're not planning to disobey my father? A small smile crossed Sigrid's face. Not disobey. Surprise. She turned to face her friend. I've spent 3 nights consulting with Astrid's seers. The silver in my hair marks me as Freya's chosen. Not merely to survive and bear witness, but to lead. Lead? You mean in battle? Thyra asked, surprise evident in her voice. Not with sword and shield as you do, Sigrid clarified, but with healing skills and strategic counsel. Jarl Astrid has recognized me as a Volva, a seeress, based on the trials I've completed under her senior priestess. I ride with the army not as warrior, but as one who carries the goddess's favor. Thyra's surprise transformed into a grin. Father will be furious, and then immensely proud. Perhaps, Sigrid allowed, touching the silver knife at her belt, Ragnar's gift, now adorned with runes she had carved herself. But this is the path the goddess has marked for me, as clearly as she marked my hair. The subsequent months unfolded in a series of skirmishes and strategic movements across the northern territories. North Point's siege was broken, though the settlement suffered significant damage. Haakon's forces retreated but regrouped, and winter descended with both sides claiming victories and suffering losses. Sigrid traveled with the combined northern army, establishing a healer's tent at each encampment. Her skills, honed under Gyda's instruction and expanded through battlefield necessity, saved countless lives. But it was her presence as the silver-haired survivor, living proof of Haakon's treachery, that proved most valuable to morale. Warriors fought harder, knowing they protected the woman whose testimony had unified their settlements. Her relationship with Ragnar deepened through shared hardship and purpose. The silver-bearded chieftain sought her counsel before battles and her company during rare moments of peace. What had begun as rescuer and survivor gradually transformed into partnership of equals, though neither spoke openly of their growing bond. With spring's thaw came the decisive confrontation. Haakon, his position weakened by the Northern Alliance's winter campaign, committed his forces to a final battle near the ruins of Ravnfjord. Whether from strategic calculation or symbolic defiance, none could say. Sigrid insisted on traveling to the battlefield despite Ragnar's objections. "This began with my survival," she told him the night before they marched. "It must end with my witness." The battle raged from dawn until dusk, with neither side gaining clear advantage until Jarl Astrid led a daring flanking maneuver that divided Haakon's forces. As his lines crumbled, the Jarl himself sought escape aboard his longship, only to find his retreat cut off by vessels from settlements he had previously conquered, now turned against him. Cornered, Haakon challenged Ragnar to single combat, a desperate gamble to salvage honor if not victory. The two chieftains met on the blood-soaked beach of Ravnfjord, their silver and gray hair gleaming in the setting sun as warriors from both sides formed a circle around them. Sigrid watched from the hillside where she had once hidden in the sacred grove, her heart pounding as the two men circled each other. Though Haakon was younger, Ragnar's experience proved decisive. After a brutal exchange of blows, the silver-bearded chieftain disarmed his opponent with a move Sigrid recognized from Thera's training sessions. With his sword at Haakon's throat, Ragnar spoke loudly enough for all to hear. "For the massacre of Ravnfjord and the violation of sacred oaths, your life is forfeit. But your death comes not by my hand alone." He looked up toward the hillside. "Sigrid Freyasdottir, last daughter of Ravnfjord, the judgment is yours to render." Silence fell as Sigrid descended to the beach, her blue dress and silver-streaked hair stark against the carnage surrounding them. She approached the kneeling Haakon, whose defiant expression faltered as he recognized the woman whose existence he had tried so desperately to erase. "You rejected me for my silver hair," she said, her voice carrying across the hushed battlefield. "Called it a curse and used it as pretext for slaughter. Now all can see it was the goddess marking me for survival when you thought none would. Remain to speak truth against you." Haakon's eyes widened as she drew the pattern-welded knife from her belt. "Mercy," he whispered, his arrogance finally broken. "I ask mercy in the gods' names." "You showed none to Ravnfjord," Sigrid replied. "But I am not you." She turned to address the assembled warriors. "His death would satisfy vengeance but not justice. Let him live, stripped of lands, title, and honor, to labor in rebuilding what he destroyed. Let every settlement he harmed claim 1 year of his service until his debt is paid, or his life ends." Murmurs spread through the crowd, some approving, others disappointed by the lack of bloodshed. Ragnar studied Sigrid with newfound respect before nodding his agreement. "So be it. Life in servitude rather than honorable death. A fitting judgment, for one who placed ambition above honor." As Haakon was led away in chains, Ragnar approached Sigrid where she stood gazing over the ruins of her birthplace. "You surprised me," he said quietly. "Many would have chosen the blade." "Death is too quick," she replied. "This way, he lives with his shame while witnessing the rebuilding of what he sought to destroy." She touched the silver streaks in her hair. "Besides, I've learned that some marks we think are curses become our greatest strengths." Ragnar's hand moved to his own silver beard. "Indeed." After a moment's hesitation, he continued. The northern settlements will need leadership now that Haakon's threat is ended. At tomorrow's council, they will likely ask me to serve as High Chieftain until the Thing can formalize the alliance. They could choose no better leader, Sigrid said sincerely. A leader needs a strong partner, Ragnar replied, his gray eyes holding hers. One marked by the gods for wisdom beyond their years. One who has proven their worth through trial and survival. His hand gently touched one of her silver streaks. The rejected bride of Ravnfjord could become the most honored wife in the northern kingdoms, if she desires such a path. Sigrid's heart raced at the unexpected proposal. And if this survivor has grown to care deeply for the silver-bearded chieftain who saw value where others saw only difference. Then perhaps, Ragnar said, his voice softening, the gods marked us both with silver not as curse, but as sign we were destined to find each other through fire and loss. Their hands intertwined as they stood together overlooking the battlefield. The silver-haired survivor and the silver-bearded chieftain, united by shared purpose and growing love. 1 year later, the rebuilt settlement of Ravnfjord hosted a wedding unlike any in living memory. Chieftains from all northern settlements gathered to witness the union of High Chieftain Ragnar Graybeard and Sigrid Silver-Touched, as she was now known. The bride wore her silver-streaked hair uncovered and adorned with Freya's symbols, a proud declaration of the mark once used to reject her. In the years that followed, the Northern Alliance flourished under their joint leadership. Sigrid established the Order of the Silver Shield, women trained in both healing arts and defense, their ranks open to any who had survived tragedy or bore distinctive marks that set them apart from others. Thera became its first commander, leading missions of mercy throughout the northern territories. And when their first child was born with a single streak of silver in her otherwise dark hair, Sigrid and Ragnar recognized it not as anomaly, but as blessing. Visible proof that sometimes what appears to be imperfection becomes the mark of extraordinary destiny. If you've enjoyed this tale of how a rejected bride with silver hair found her true worth and changed the fate of the northern kingdoms, make sure to subscribe to our channel. New Viking legends arrive every week, bringing you stories of courage, honor, and the unexpected ways the gods mark those destined for greatness. Leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from, and share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that our perceived flaws often become our greatest strengths.